Ah, perfect. You can. Thank you, Christina. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, then I can get going. And what I wanted to start with is by saying this is a pre-title sequence, and I'm going to share with you a myth that's been passed down through the years from entrepreneur to entrepreneur, from Henry Ford to Richard Branson to Steve Jobs, and now to you, that these people were born screaming out fantastic ideas with their first breath, that you have to come up with multiple amazing ideas to join that select few and call yourselves a successful tech entrepreneur. At least that is what they'd like you to think. All successful entrepreneurs come up with big business ideas. I'm here to tell you that's not quite true. And that's going to be what I'm going to be talking about today. The second thing to bear in mind, here's another part of the myth. Entrepreneurs must find their big business idea by wandering the dry desert of business and tech until inspiration strikes. I'm here to tell you, you don't need to go wandering, because design can help you. Design can be your guide and your oasis, because today I am going to talk about how design can help you find your big business idea. Welcome to this Printify Masterclass at TechChill 2021. And I hope you've been enjoying the conference so far. There's been a lot of great sessions. This is what I'm going to talk about today. So firstly, who am I and what is Printify? You can see I'm wearing my Printify t-shirt today, as in the photo. I lead the product designers at Printify, and essentially the way we like to talk about it is we hunt down and fix user problems. Printify is a platform that aims to disrupt the worldwide printing industry, and we are one of Latvia's fastest growing tech startups. So there's a lot going on. You can find out more at printify.com, and a little bit of interactivity. I would urge you now at home to click your fingers in recognition of our company logo. Now, next one, interactivity alert. I wanted to warn you that on the next slide, I'm going to ask you to do something. We're going to try to write in the chat. So please wake up and listen. Who are you? I'm interested to understand exactly who you are. So if somebody could, if all of you could write in how you would see yourselves, those who are attending this session. Are you, for example, entrepreneurs? Are you designers, engineers, management, or anything else? So where can I see this? Okay, nothing appearing in the chat. Let's try a different approach. Let's try this. We'll have to slightly hack this. If you could go into this URL, please, wherever you're watching, and write your answers to this question here. Nothing? Maybe I'm not working this correctly then. Let me see. Nope, nothing at all. Okay, we'll move on from this section then. Not to worry. I will assume that the majority of you are entrepreneurs and proceed on that basis. Ah, hey, I got from me. Okay, I'm a designer. Thank you. Now, excited entrepreneur and design junkie. Thank you very much, Christos. Excellent. Now we're getting some information. So great to have you on board. I will proceed. So, firstly, I just wanted to give some context. So I wanted to show how we at Printify are describing different stages of product. First stage we would describe as product discovery. That's broadly a design stage, though absolutely all other parts of the squad are involved. Then we go into product delivery, and that's more led by development and engineering, where the actual product is created. Then the product is released into production, and then finally we have a product review once it's up and running. Today, I'm going to be focusing on product discovery. Maybe that's not such a surprise as I work with design, but I just wanted to put this into a little bit of context for you. Also, I wanted to focus on product discovery because that's where the big ideas are generated. So, moving on. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the big questions of our time. What is design? Before we get into the nitty-gritty of how to come up with big ideas. Thank you very much. I can see the information coming in slowly about who you are. Marketer, thank you very much. It's great to see those coming in. Great to get a bit of audience interaction. So what is design? Back to this. First of all, I'll talk a little bit historically, how design was seen. Design as an output. And this, for me, is part of the great big idea myth that I talked about earlier. And it's part of what's called scientific management, which has been the dominant approach to management for most of the 20th century, at least. It goes something like this, that you would manufacture the big idea. It would be very organization-centric, so centered around the needs and the flow of production through the organization that's doing the production. And then you would find ways to reduce costs to maximize profits. You can see it shown here. And this is how you would be working with, Henry Ford or those sorts of very basic production processes, which have become more and more sophisticated over the years. But it's basically always following this approach. However, when it comes to working with digital products and digital design, it's such a wasted opportunity because those products and those services are so much more complex than this model can really cope with. Plus, the creative role of both designers and engineers are really undervalued in this process. But you'd be surprised how many executives and entrepreneurs still think like this, even working with digital products today. Basically, for this one, I would say this: stop thinking about design and engineering like this. It is just wrong. And I'll show you how we would see it. So, design as a strategic process is the other way to do it. And here it's about developing the big idea, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about. And then it's designing all the relevant user touch points. It's very user-centric, and then it's about iterating and improving. So this is how we would depict it. Design's placed in the middle, obviously. Like every other discipline in an organization, we put ourselves at the center because the sun must revolve around us. But this is the argument that essentially design can add value at every touch point in the user experience. And it is also the part of the organization that knits together the experience across all these touch points. So, and I have to give a credit to a fantastic book, which is called Org Design for Design Orgs, published by O'Reilly, which gave me both of these diagrams. Essentially, this to me is right. And this is the way that modern entrepreneurs should be thinking about how they can squeeze the most value out of design and out of designers. So next, I can talk a little bit about design methods, how they're being applied in new areas over the last 20 years. So we can start off with the classic physical product design. So that is chairs or other objects that have been designed over the years. Then, obviously, since the internet age began, we've started to see more digital products exist. And so these new domains started to come into existence, such as user experience design, UX design, user interface design, and therefore digital product design, which is seen as a mixture of those two, arguably. But in the last 10 years or so, we've started to see more strategic forms of design applied. And that includes business design, organizational design, and service design. And the key thing is they're all applying these same basic design principles that were developed for physical product design, but in new spaces. So essentially, it's the same old methods being applied to new areas. And we can see it's a move from products into experiences. And I will return to this slide later on towards the end of this talk, because actually this is really key, but we'll take you on a journey first, and I think this will make more sense later on. So next, I wanted to mention that these ideas are really nicely summarized in a TED Talk from Tim Brown, who is the exec chair at IDEO, which is a really famous design agency in California. It's known for so many things that they've created, including creating the first commercial computer mouse for Apple in 1980. And in this talk, he argues that design thinking is basically what Victorian engineering genius Isambard Kingdom Brunel was practicing back 200 years ago. But what design became known as was just the aesthetic side, i.e. how things look. And that is a huge shame, because it's only part of the value design can add, and design can really give you a lot more than that, as I'll continue to explain today. But if you have a spare 20 minutes, go and watch this TED Talk. I thoroughly recommend it. So moving on, I'll show you this diagram, which is about balance. And as you can see already, I like to communicate through diagrams, and this one is one of my absolute favorites. I'll walk you through it. A circle which represents business or commercial side, a circle which represents users, which obviously designers are very focused on the needs of users, and then a circle which focuses on tech or engineering. And then ideally, your product or service should somehow incorporate all these three elements. And in this, I urge you to seek balance in your big idea between the three legs of digital products, which is commercial or business, users, and tech. And a really, really good idea, this is a good test for an idea, it should innovate in all three areas. It should solve a new, real user problem. It should use technology in an innovative way, and it should monetize it in a new way. And if you think about it, all the really big, innovative digital products, such as Google's original search product and Facebook's original social feed, they did all three. So this is something to bear in mind, and we'll come back to this diagram later. So what are the classic principles of design thinking? It's really two things: solving real user problems, and that's user problems that are real, not problems of real users. Also, the second thing is to learn, iterate, and improve. So I'll just show you that again in another way. Number one, be user-centric and problem-focused, plus iterate to improve. And these, to me, are the classic principles of design thinking, which should be applied whenever you're trying to come up with a big business idea. We'll come back to these. So the classic design principles applied. I want to talk to you about a classic armchair that was designed in the 1950s. Today it's seen as a design classic, but it's still in production today, 65 years later. And what I want to point out is that it went through the same rigorous design process that is also still used today, solving real user problems and then iterating to improve. This is called if you didn't know, this is called the Eames lounge chair and ottoman, is the footrest. It was designed by husband and wife team Charles and Ray Eames, working at the Herman Miller Furniture Company in Michigan, USA. And it was released in 1956 after years of development by the designers. So at a high level, this is, we're going to talk about how design and designers can help you find your big business idea, and applying the same methods and approaches from classic product design to develop modern digital business ideas. But first, we must focus on the problems that this chair solves, not the solution, very beautiful as it is. So back to our new favorite diagram. I want to give you some context. Imagine that it's 1951, 5 years before the chair is released, and the USA is experiencing its post-war boom. So this is a completely imaginary brief that I've made up, but imagine it's from the Herman Miller Furniture Company in Michigan, USA in 1951. And again, this has nothing to do with Printify, so I'm actually going to remove the Printify logo there, and you can click your fingers later on in your own time. So first, we want to hear from the business side. So representing business is none other than DJ Dupree, who was CEO of the Herman Miller Furniture Company from when he founded it in 1923 to when he stepped down in 1965 and his sons took over. He was real, the brief is not. Here we go. So I imagine he would say something like this: our company's armchair range is too mainstream and we can't compete against high-end Italian manufacturers. We need a new premium American armchair product to move into that price segment. So that's the business problem that needs to be solved. So then let's look at the user problem. So right in the middle of this 1950s boom, a consumer would say, I need to sit in a chair while watching my new TV. It should be both comfortable and stylish so that we can show it off to our friends. So that's what the user's needs are. And then let's look at what tech are helping with. The engineer might pipe up and say, hey, I've read about a new industrial technique for laminating thin layers of wood with glue to create strong natural shapes. Maybe that could be something useful. So this shows how business, users, and tech are contributing. And the product that resulted from this imaginary brief was, of course, the Eames Lounge chair. And what would happen next? Charles and Ray would get to play. And these are the husband and wife team that designed the chair. And you can see that play was very much part of their toolbox. My point here is that the same process that was used to develop this product should be used today to develop digital products and services. So, moving on, how to apply all this to find your big idea if we come back to the central theme of this masterclass. First, some bling. Maybe you're already thinking about how you're going to spend all the money from your big idea, thinking about that yacht. Actually, Double Diamond is a model and a process to come up with a big product idea or a new feature idea for an existing product. It doesn't usually look as pretty as this. I'll show you more what it looks like. So this is the Double Diamond process. And this is referencing back to product discovery. As you can see, I've sort of expanded product discovery, and product delivery is the next phase, as I mentioned in the earlier slides. First of all, first part of the first diamond is called problem discovery. And then we go into problem validation. And we can see here how problem discovery is expansive. Problem validation is reductive. So in problem discovery, you're opening up and trying to find as many problems as possible. In problem validation, you're trying to work out which problems are real, i.e. they are relevant to as many users as possible. And then once you've found your validated problems, then you go expansive again into solution, which is where you come up with the big ideas. And then once you have got those ideas, then you validate them with users or through other techniques. So again, then you're being more reductive. Now, you might think this process is strictly waterfall, like that, moving through the phases. In fact, it's not. In fact, it is much more iterative, because again, going back to those design thinking principles, iterative, iterative, iterative. In the, you will move between problem discovery and problem validation in a circle. At some point you'll move forward, and then you go into the solution diamond, and then you're also working in a circular way. What it delivers, though, is the big idea. And this is the key thing for me, is it's a process that we must move through and trust. These big ideas, they don't come from the desert. They don't come from just somebody coming up with something. It's hard work, it's a process, and it's a team. So this is what we do. And once you get the big idea, then you can move into product delivery and start building. But I'm going to start off talking about the first stage, which is problem discovery. And then I'm going to go step by step through each of the 4 stages and talk a little bit about how we work at Printify with some examples. And we go from there. So the first thing I wanted to say, though, is when to use the double diamond. So I would say, obviously, entrepreneur looking for the big idea. And this is where this talk is really aimed, this masterclass is aimed at. But it's also appropriate for established companies creating new features, and that's why I'm bringing in these examples from Printify. We use the same process to work on new features to our existing product as an entrepreneur would be using to look for the big idea. Some slight variances of methodologies, but essentially it's the same thinking, because these are the design principles which have served for so many years. Both require real user problems and iteration, going back to those core design thinking principles. Right. So moving into problem discovery. What this is about is essentially finding a problem. To find your great business idea, you must first find a real user problem. And at Printify, we say you must fall in love with problems, not solutions. It's very, very important. So, ways to find a problem. There are many, many different ways. I'll go through a few of them. Essentially, you yourself can be finding a problem through something that you've experienced. You can observe other people experiencing problems using digital services or using digital products or outside as well. You can ask your family and friends what problems they're experiencing. You can research it yourself, looking at trends and search analysis. And so in this way, you would see what are the search terms that are being, through Google, you can see what search terms are trending the most, to get a sense of what people are most worried about at the moment. Industry forums is another great place to find problems. If there are long threads of people complaining and trying to work things out, then that's definitely a problem behind there. And then you can also, in a more professional context, you can get professional researchers to do this for you. You can do qualitative interviews focused on a particular area, or you could do more like surveys, larger scale surveys, quantitative research as well. So a range of different things that are possible. What you're essentially trying to do is generate empathy with the users. And there's lots of different ways to describe that. You want to walk in their shoes. Methods to do that is to create personas, where you describe them, who they are, what they do in their daily life, give them a name. You want to try and spend time with these people, and talk to them or observe them, explore their data, explore what they're doing, and essentially you're trying to understand them. So that's what this problem-seeking focus is all about. So what you need to do if you want to come up with a big idea is become a problem collector. So for example, high interest categories, holidays, and don't worry here, I put in a couple of examples of major services and products that exist, or businesses that exist based on these high interest categories. Don't worry if there is already a major player in a high interest category. You can always think of a different angle or find a new problem. So transport, for example, meeting people, hot areas of the internet is another good way to start. So social media, data services, blockchain, very hot, e-commerce, always good. Work out where people spend their time online today and the problems they encounter there, and the areas that you find interesting. So a good example of this is, I was listening to a podcast recently about Spotify. Daniel Ek, who's the founder of Spotify, he said he liked music and he liked technology and he wanted to do start a tech business. So he ended up founding Spotify and worked out along the way exactly what the problems were that he was going to try and solve. And you've got to remember, you're going to spend a large % of your time thinking about this and working with this area. So make sure you find it interesting. So here's an example from Printify about how we work in exactly this same space. At Printify, we're always thinking about the print providers that we work with, our partners, and trying to understand the problems that they face. So we recently ran an internal problem discovery workshop to better understand this, and I can share with you the format that we use. This is a masterclass where I'm sharing specific methods and so on. So first of all, a credit to the designer in our team, Alex, who basically what he did, he conceived and facilitated the problem discovery workshop for the squad that he works within, which is a squad that looks after creating services for print providers. He is passionate about finding and solving problems for print providers in the Printify network. So I will go into some detail now about the discovery workshop format that we followed. It was about 3 hours. It was around 8 people, and it was a mix of the product manager, commercial team, designers, and engineers. Always had regular breaks. This is a really important part of facilitating workshops, which is a core design skill, I always argue. We had a warm-up exercise. That's very important, particularly when you're working, on video calls and with online whiteboard services. Like, for example, we used Miro, but there are others. It takes some time to warm up and get used to working with those. So we did a quick warm-up exercise. What we did was we chose 3 roles within print providers, and we did that by exploring these roles that are the same across many, many of our different print providers across our network. And so we did that by asking the commercial team, who have most contact with print providers, to explain to us the different roles that exist. And then we did a bit of voting and discussion about it. There were many roles, but we chose just 3, which we thought were the most important. Examples of those roles were integration manager was one of them, and then production manager was another one within a print provider company. Then we split into smaller groups, and we created what are called empathy maps for each of the 3 roles, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. Then we basically swapped around, so all these groups got to work on all 3 roles and got to explore them and understand their problems better, try to empathize more with the individual roles. And then basically from that, we were able to use that as a foundation to generate the problems that each role faces. And we were then able to cluster those problems together into what we call opportunity spaces. And we can take those opportunity spaces forward to validate them with print providers in our network. So that's the first half of the first diamond, if you go back to the diagram. So that was it. That was done. This was an example of the warm-up exercise. You probably can't quite see it, but essentially Alex came up with this idea that we would we would choose an animal to depict the different roles that we were looking at. And that was just so you had to choose an animal and explain why to the group. So that was a good example. And then empathy map. This is an example of an empathy map. There are many different ones, but this is quite a good one. So starting from the left, we try to write down, using Post-its, as you can see, write down the frictions, the daily challenges and time-consuming things that happen for each of the roles, the frustrations they have, what annoys them, the concerns about maybe working with us at Printify. In the middle, in their heart, is about what their needs are, what this person really wants. And then on the right-hand side, we have the excitement, what makes them happy, opportunities to improve their work, and the hopes and expectations. So essentially what we did in our groups was write down what we conceived fitted into these categories on Post-it notes and then place them in the relevant area. And that starts to give an emotional picture, which allows us to drive empathy. What outputs did we therefore get? Well, we had essentially empathy maps of the 3 roles. You can see how all the Post-it notes are there. And then we had opportunity spaces derived from each of the empathy maps. So another way of showing that is we discovered a lot of problems. We discovered approximately 12 opportunity spaces to validate, and that's a lot of output for 3 hours work. Our learning outcomes, there were multiple. The group got to know each other a bit better, which is always good in these COVID times. All members of the group also understand the roles within print providers better and the problems they face, and they have a common aligned view on that. And this is very important to help with empathy with the products moving forward. And the other benefits, this is something I really believe I learned years ago, is that people support what they help to create. So all the participants are more engaged, therefore more productive and innovative. And it goes back to that sense of bringing all of the group together so that they can be part of creating whatever we move forward with. So another warning here, the warning of the temptation of solutions. So it's really easy to fall in love with a solution, but one has to avoid solutionizing too early in the process. And the reason is simple. Maybe the user problems that you're finding a solution for aren't real. You must validate the problems before you start coming up with solutions. Because you should only spend resources on solutions to problems that have been validated. It's really, really important. It's easy to fall in love with the solution, and then you move forward with it and you get your heart broken because when you try to validate that solution, you find that none of the users are actually interested in it because it's not a real user problem. And this is a very, very common scenario because, you know, engineers, designers, many people working within the organizations are by their very nature problem solvers. And so it's hard to hold yourself back, but one must for these very good reasons. Yep, so then we move forward to the next part of the diamond, and that is essentially problem validation. So problem validation, what we're trying to work through is, are these problems opportunity spaces actually real? How many people experience the same problems? And essentially we're looking at data and research to try to validate that, and we're looking for evidence to validate. So there's an example. I picked a few validation methods, and these are just a few. There are many. I picked the ones that relate more to finding a new business idea, not for developing features within a company. One example is you just try to find 5 to 10 potential customers for the opportunity spaces. And you can do that in your own network, family, friends, whoever, people in the office, you know. This can be done in a very quick guerrilla style. And you quite quickly, with that number of people, you quite quickly get a sense of whether this is real or not. You can find where potential customers are and ask them about the opportunity spaces. So that could be conferences, trade shows, you know, in a post-COVID world, or meetup groups, you know, industry forums and networking events, etc. You can also search for apps, plugins, and macros in your opportunity space. And if they exist, then there is definitely a problem there to find. And you can read the reviews, explore the level of satisfaction and frustration, and that helps to focus the opportunity space a bit more. You could conduct qual interviews with potential customers. This is obviously a much bigger investment. Professional researchers involved, and you can send out quant surveys to the potential customer segments. Essentially, it's about data and research working together to deliver these most robust results. So I can tell you about the problem validation techniques at Printify. And I asked one of our UX researchers which problem validation techniques she uses, and this was her answer. She said one framework we find really useful is something called a value proposition canvas. Helps to structure the information about what the users want. And I think this is a really good way to describe it. It helps to visualize the patterns of value creation. So I will very quickly show you the value proposition canvas. Essentially, it's a two-sided model. The customer profile, where one looks looks at the gains and pains and the jobs that a customer needs to get done. And then the value proposition should match that. So the gain creators should amplify the gains. The pain relievers should mitigate the pains. And then the products and services should solve the tasks or jobs that the customer has to be done. Here's an example from Printify of one where we use this technique. And again, it was post-its we put together, a list of tasks and the gains and the pains, just to show how we work together. And this sets up the team really nicely for solution discovery, which is the next stage, because the required results from both pain relievers and gain creators are really clearly stated, and the tasks that the product or service, like the solution, needs to achieve are really clearly written down. So another thing we have to remember, we love iteration. So in this first diamond, problem discovery and problem validation, sometimes problem validation leads to uncovering more problems and opportunity spaces, and this is completely normal. Iteration is a very productive and dynamic part of the design and innovation process, so we should embrace it, we should love it. Iteration is a huge part of applying design techniques. More and faster iterations will deliver better results, so anytime you can find a way to iterate faster, it's going to get better. So that was the end of that, and now solution discovery we move into. So now the fun bit starts. Some people might say, I think it's all fun, but finally you can take the chains off, release the floodgates of ideas based on the problems you found and validated. Now coming up with solutions, can be very creative, very fun, but even here there are frameworks that can help and one should stick to. So where are we? We are in solution discovery within the double diamond, and inputs to solution generation. This is a way to sort of describe the way I like to think about solution generation. Is first of all, the biggest one is the validated user problems. As we said, there are the opportunities that come from tech, the example I gave from the Eames chair. But in a digital world, there could be many, many other opportunities to do with data that's not being utilized or can be monetized in some interesting way, turned into a service, or other opportunities of new tech that's been recently created. There is the commercial strategy. One needs to have a commercial strategy in place. There are operational opportunities based on particular way your company works. One needs to always look at the competition, the market, and see what they're doing. And then finally, I always think you should be challenging yourself to come up with something special, something different, something really, really exciting that gets everybody in the room really up for it. It's important to challenge yourself in this way. So, some solution discovery tips. Who should be involved? Absolutely everyone that you can get involved, essentially. If it's a squad you're working within, so a mixture of designers and developers, that's great. If there's a team you're working in, you should get them involved. If you're doing this at home, get your family involved, your friends, etc., etc., etc. Especially the engineers. Involve as many people as possible. The ideas get better and the buy-in is greater. How? Learn to make. This is one way to think about it, is that you research the market and any competition, plus any similar sectors before you start creating solutions. You get as much information in as you can. And then there's another philosophy, which is make to learn. So that you play around first to see what might work and then iterate back towards the users, the competition, etc., etc. So different people will like to work in different ways, but both are valid if they produce good results. Again, iterating, I'm saying it again and again, but it's so important. Iterate to develop and improve the solutions. Never trust your first idea. Don't fall in love. There's a phrase, kill your darlings, which is you must always change it and kill the first idea. You should seek critique, not praise. This is a very important concept that if you want to get better, if you want the solution to get better, you should go and give people permission to pull it to bits, essentially. And that way it will get better. And if somebody does give you feedback, particularly harsh feedback, you should accept it as the gift that it is, because they have a perspective that you yourself do not have. And they're really, really helping you. And then you should build on ideas if you're working in a group by saying things like, yes, and I think we could do it this way, rather than no, but it won't work, it won't work. That sort of kills the process. How many solutions? Well, I would say you should aim to get a minimum of 3 solutions for each problem and take those forward into validation. That's just a rough rule of thumb. So ways to think in solution mode. Innovation can seem like kind of a scary word, but actually this is a good way to make it less scary. Combining known things in a new way. That's innovation, a very good definition of it. Another way to think is around crowdsourcing ideas. Basically, more perspectives gives you more innovative solutions. So the more people you get involved, the better, I would say. Another way to think is be playful. Very important to establish a playful atmosphere when you're coming up with solutions. Formality is a huge barrier to creativity, and you need to give yourself permission to create and give yourself permission to make mistakes. It's very important. Then sketching. This is another big part of it. Fast iterations with pen, paper, and whiteboard. Sketching is such a key part of the design process and how you come up with solutions. It's faster and more efficient. It's important you don't go near a computer until you're fairly sure you're on the right track with a solution. So here's some examples from Printify. As we were working on improving our t-shirt design tool or our product design tool, here's some examples to show how we're doing it. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. You know, sketching in a group is almost like a therapeutic exercise. I really recommend it. You just try to work out your initial ideas, scrap that, go into the next one, show it to somebody else, bounce it around, and it gets better really, really fast. So sketching is really, really key. And I can show you a little bit about how solutions evolve, or how I see it. You start off with sketching, as I just said, and you have multiple iterations when you're sketching. Then you go take something forward into low fidelity designs. Again, you're iterating here, you show them to other people, you try to get more information. And at this stage, both these stages, really, you should have killed a lot of darlings. Dead darlings should basically be all over the floor, because at these stages, you should be iterating all the time. And then you use techniques such as design critique to show people, and you start to review the feasibility. Then you can move towards making high fidelity designs. You maybe make a prototype, a clickable prototype, which can be used for validating with real users. So these are the sort of stages you go through, and there's a whole lot of ideas at the beginning of the funnel, and by the end, you should only have those 3. So, congratulations, you come up with your 3 solid solutions to your problems and opportunity space. You've got solution 1, you've got solution 2, solution 3. Is it time to buy that house in the French Riviera yet? Oh no, because next is solution validation. So, to find your big idea and to make sure that the big idea is going to work, we're talking about solution validation. Essentially, it's about testing with users. In this final stage, you're putting your ideas and your solutions under the microscope, and you're trying to break them, basically. You test usability of the solutions, iterate and improve them. If you followed the process and built your solutions on a validated problem, then your ideas should test well, but it can always be improved. So here's an example of solution validation with a user from Printify. We did it over one of our researchers, Stiliano, and it was one of our designers, Casper. They worked together to do solution validation over Zoom and with a particular tool. So a user is essentially talked through a script of tasks to complete. And this is the qualitative interview that we talked about. So the script is standardized so that we can compare how hard or easy it was to complete the same tasks for different users. If there's a problem, we will see multiple users struggle at the same moment of the user flow. And that means we know we have a problem with that area and need to fix it. We encourage the user to verbalize what they're thinking and doing as they work through the tasks. We also observe closely what's happening in the interface and critically on the user's face. because users' intentions and actions are often quite different. Here we've been investigating how to improve our design tool, building on those sketches that you saw in the solution discovery phase. And essentially, I can't emphasize like how brilliant this is to do this. This is so important. And you know, there's really no way that you can create a decent user experience without this sort of process of validating your solutions before you move forward into development. You learn so much. Here's another shot of one of our designers, Casper, who is also running the session. So same process. So testing with users is one technique for solution validation. But what I would say is some ideas have a more analytical approach, or they benefit from a more analytical approach. So if the idea is clearly innovative for users and tech, but it doesn't have the commercial innovation side, or it's not clear, then maybe a different approach is better. So for example, something called a business model canvas can be used as an analysis tool at this stage, much as the value proposition canvas was used during problem validation. It's very similar. Starts to work, you know, more like sort of business design and start to overlap with a lot of other domains in essence. So this is just a very quick view of what a business model canvas looks like, and essentially you would apply it to your solution, your big idea. And again, it's a cheap and relatively quick way to assess the potential from a business point of view of your solution, of your idea. And it really depends on what sort of solution and idea you've come up with. I just wanted to put it out there as an example. So once again, we love iteration. So we're in the solution side of the diamond, or the solution diamond. And what I would say is solutions nearly always get changed after users test them. So many times I've seen designers and engineers go into usability testing so confident that they've thought of everything, that, you know, this is the one, absolutely it's gonna work, and then they go into usability testing and they find that their assumption wasn't quite right, or it can be improved in this way, improved in that way. It's super valuable, this part of the process. And that's the power of this approach, essentially, that the solutions, the ideas, they get better. And it produces ideas with a better chance of commercial success because they are user-centric. They often end up going back into solution discovery in that a little bit more design work is done, or it gets adapted, and so on and so forth. But once again, iteration is key here. And the other thing to think about is, like, it's a form of insurance. If you haven't tested your ideas with users, and then you go ahead and spend all that money or raise the money in order to create the product or service, you haven't taken out the insurance, which you could do relatively cheaply by this approach. So it never makes sense to me that quite major corporations will launch a product without having tested it with users first. So this is another good one to remember. The cost of fixing a product mistake grows. If you know, nobody knows everything, so inevitably sort of mistakes are made. However, if you fix it in the product discovery stage, which is when it's still in design, it could cost perhaps $1. If you fix it in development, product delivery, it could cost you $10 to fix the same problem. And after release, when it's in production, you have to put it back and rework it all. Then it's going to cost you something like $100. And these figures came from a book. It's kind of old book, but I think it's still a relevant way to think. This is why you should invest in product discovery. And at Printify, we try to invest more and more of our squad's energy, particularly the product manager and the product designer, in product discovery in order to save this money. And that's why this is what the smart companies do, essentially, because you save money in the long term and you build the right thing first time. So product managers and designers should be spending something like 60% of their time working in product discovery. simply because it makes the most economic sense. So, conclusion. To find your big idea. The big idea is within your reach. However, you probably shouldn't think about it as a big idea. It's actually a big problem that you have to find. You must trust the process, follow this process, and you too can come up with an amazing business idea for a tech startup, and it will have a reasonable chance of commercial success because you've ensured it by using this process. Hopefully this slide, coming back to this one, now makes a bit more sense, and you can see how design has developed over the years, and it's still a great approach to creating great products, but also digital products, strategic experiences, and that wonderful word, phygital, mixing physical and digital experiences within the same product or service. So the same process can be applied in these new areas and gives a lot of value. So final slide, just remember that problems are forever. Good luck in finding your rough diamonds and polishing them into fantastic business ideas. Now you know that it's not a big business idea you're looking for, it's actually a big business problem. Thank you very much for listening today and all the best. If you want to discuss further any of the topics that I covered today, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. We've got a few minutes left, so I could take some questions if that would be of interest to you. Just to say thank you very much for listening today, and I will end this session.